Yeah.
What's going on, everyone? So today I am joined by Corinne Wooden, fairy quad mother on Instagram. I'll put that up somewhere around here again, like last week with my good editing. Most of you will know her. She was a former bodybuilder. She's a powerlifter now. She switched. She has a really good insight into bodybuilding. Disordered eating, how that affected her. She is doing her doctorates of philosophy. What is it? Can you give me the whole title again, please, of what you're doing?
I'm doing my Doctor of Philosophy in Post-Human Feminism.
Post-Human Feminism. It's a lot of words, and I have small brain capacity. And she just competed at Pro Raw Sleeves' second comp, right?
Yes.
So her second comp, she went 152.5 on the squat, 77.5 on the bench, and 160 on the deadlift at 66 kilos. So some massive numbers, even bigger when you factor in it's her second comp. But when you see the photos, you'll understand why. She's got huge quads. So she's come on today to talk about her own experience in bodybuilding, her own experience with disordered eating, and then she's also a very good coach. She actually coaches my partner, Danny. So she's got some insight there as well, on things like diet culture and everything, and that'll all tie in with her PhD, funnily enough, right? It's all interconnected. So I'm going to hand it over. Just like last time, I'm here to facilitate the conversation and ask questions, but it is Corinne's platform today. So enjoy. She's going to start by giving you some insight into, I'm throwing you under the bus here, giving you some insight into her past, her experiences with bodybuilding and everything, and we will go from there. We're going to end with some questions from people as well. We're getting real professional. We've got like 3 to 5 questions that Corinne's going to answer today at the end. So take it away. It's all yours.
Thank you. Well, I also just want to start off by saying thank you so much, Anthony, for having me on. I absolutely adore you, and I have been so inspired by you and your lifting ever since I watched you compete in 2019. Was the first time I ever saw you on the platform, and I was literally just sitting there with my jaw dropped next to my partner, just like, what is this? This is insane. So to come on today, I feel really, really lucky. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It means a lot.
So yes, I'm Corinne. I'm also the Fairy Quad Mother on social media. I am a online coach and personal trainer through my own business, Move For You PT. And our whole purpose at Move For You PT is to really build our clients up by focusing on performance pursuits over aesthetic aspirations. And a lot of that has really stemmed from my experience with bodybuilding and how I've kind of done a whole 180 in my approach to training, diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and things like that. To give you a little bit of background into who I am and why I'm here and where I've come from, I was, like most Australian kids, really sporty growing up. I did swimming for 10 years, athletics, dancing, kind of followed my mum and her ballerina pursuits for a little bit. But my dad was always really sort of hell-bent on me performing athletics and doing swimming for a long period of time, which I did, and quite successfully as well.
What level did you swim at? Sorry, just to
I went to states quite frequently, especially through high school and primary school as well, which is really weird thinking back on it. But it sounds so strange, like thinking of how long I actually swam for, like 10-year period. And and it wasn't until maybe when I was around 15 that a lot of that really stopped. I was quite heavily invested in diet culture at that time, and the belief that in order to be a worthwhile human, I needed to look a very specific way. That being said, it didn't really sort of take its head until I finished high school. I was a very academic, perfectionistic kid, and that was all I was really focused on. So once I finished high school, I had this very bizarre goal, and I've told this story so many times, but I had this really strange goal of wanting to be 45 kilos. I thought that because I was 5 foot, very petite, in order to be as beautiful as like Ariana Grande, I also needed to be 45 kilos because that was apparently how much she weighed. Whether that was true or not is a whole different story.
That's so light, hey?
It's very light. And a lot of people will say that, at 5 foot, 45 kilos isn't that light. But really, it's when you start looking at pictures of what I looked like at the time, I was very thin and very unhealthy, and it was a very long process. So I eventually did get to 45 kilos. It took me about 2.5 years through the process of exercising for up to 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, all cardio. That's all I did. I was a huge cardio bunny. And it wasn't until I was trying on some dresses that had fit me a few years before that I realized I had really sort of sunk in deep. I wasn't in a good place. When I tried on those dresses, they completely fell off me. I had no shape. I went from a D cup breast to an A cup. So a lot of weight was lost. And my mum looked at me in the mirror and was like, what have you done? And
do you know how much weight you lost overall?
10 kilos.
Yeah, it's huge.
So I went from 55 kilos at the end of high school to 45 kilos. And I was so proud of myself. For a lot of my childhood, my dad was he picked on my body a lot. Not intentionally, to be honest, but it was a lot of poking and prodding and making fun of my tummy. And when I had lost that 10 kilos, I was so proud because he couldn't pinch my stomach anymore. I would go up to him and be like, look, you can't do anything. You can't pinch it. I'm flat. And I was so happy about it.
Did you find that a lot? Sorry, I keep
No, go ahead.
Let me know if I'm sidetracking you.
No, go ahead.
But I've known people as well that have had issues with disordered eating and eating disorders. They're the same thing, right?
So having a diagnosed eating disorder is very different to having disordered eating behaviors. So I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I exhibited very pronounced disordered eating behavior. So it's all on a spectrum.
Would it be like the difference between, say, anxiety, getting anxious and having generalized anxiety?
Yes, exactly. Exactly like that.
So did you find that it was spurred on? Thanks for clarifying that, by the way, because I think a lot of people just think they're interchangeable, like I did.
You're right. Yeah.
Did you find that a lot of people, it was spurred on by a lot of people? Because people I know that have had eating disorders and disordered eating, people be like, oh my God, you look so good and you're doing so well. Oh, whatever, keep doing what you're doing. It's working. And then, people end up at 45 kilos and people are like, oh no, go back now. You can't. And then it kind of sends mixed messages, right? And people are like, well, you were just telling me I was doing really well. Did you get that a lot? You find that? Is that quite common?
I was very much so encouraged by a lot of my friends, not so much my family, but definitely by my friends and those around me who would, praise me with positive comments. And I felt really rewarded by that positivity. And there was this belief that I was, doing the right thing and doing good by myself and, putting myself in a position where I was, worthy and beautiful. And that's all I really wanted at the time. And my body was sort of the most important thing about me for me at that period of time, which is quite upsetting looking back on it. And I would never advocate for the same mindset anymore, obviously. But my mum was quite aggressive in a very loving way about, what have you done to yourself, which I'm very grateful for, to be honest. And it was really in that moment where I had a switch just flicked and I said, you know what, I'm going to go sign up to a gym and I'm going to get strong because I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to feel sick. And I was very recurringly unwell during this period of time. I don't want to be in this position anymore where I have to pick myself apart to the ends of the earth in order to justify why I feel this way.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 19, 20.
19 or 20, and you think the big switch in that was your mum's positive pressure?
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I don't think if it wasn't for my mum, I probably wouldn't have realized how deep I had gotten with my behavior. I wouldn't have noticed. I wouldn't have been able to look at myself objectively and realize that actually I had gone too far.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful for that, as brutal as it was at the time. Very, very thankful.
Right, it had to be a hard conversation, and
Absolutely.
but also hard to not get defensive in that situation as well, right? And kind of double down. So it's credit to your mum. I mean, as much as it was hard, also credit to you for looking at it and having that self-awareness, I guess.
Exactly. I was very grateful to be able to be self-aware enough to look at myself then as objectively as I could and realize that this was not the situation that I wanted. This is not the goal that I envisaged. And it was always about, I'll be happy when That's always the conversation that tends to come up. Like, I'll be happy when I do this, or I'll be happy when I have achieved this body, or I'll be happy when I have, a flat stomach.
Or when I'm 45 kilos. Or
yeah, exactly. And I definitely was not happy when I achieved all of those aforementioned things.
It's a hard trap to get out of as well. Like for me, even me, I'm like, I'll be happy when I have abs. Got abs. I was like, I'll be happy when I'm 12% body fat. You know what I mean? At 120,
like going.
The goalpost just gets further away every single time.
And it was, I was miserable. I had a severely weakened immune system. I had no sex drive, and I still thought I was fat. At 45 kilos with incredibly stick thin arms. I looked like a head on a stick, and I'll send you a photo that you can like link up in this point somewhere. But I still thought I was fat at this point, and nothing was ever enough. And once you get to that point, like you said, that goalpost keeps just sort of getting further and further away, and nothing is ever enough. So it's, you don't really want to have to keep taking things one step further. So I'm very grateful that, I had my loved one, my mum, there to really prompt me to take action and really reevaluate what was actually important to me. So making that decision to really go to the gym and lift weights for the first time was the best decision I ever made. Yeah.
So you've signed up to the gym. You've recognized that there's, you're obviously going to be better at describing this than me, but like disordered eating, there's, would you call it bad habits, like unhealthy habits, like destructive mentally as well?
It was like I never restricted myself to any food groups, but I would like only have an apple for breakfast, and I would start to really sort of praise certain really healthy, quote unquote, clean foods, and I would put a health halo over certain foods, and try to rationalize why I shouldn't have so much of this food, and which was really interesting given my like Italian heritage, trying to avoid pasta or limit really like bread and just delicious food that I would want to have all the time. And then of course you start to develop cravings and participate in binge behaviors. And one thing that did pop up for me a lot was I would and I actually should have at the beginning of this conversation put a trigger warning in place just for anyone.
I'll put one at the start. I'll just slide it in. Just really good idea.
A lot of this conversation could be quite triggering to a lot of people. But something that did pop up for me during late high school and then moving into the sort of depths of my disordered eating behaviors was I would take laxatives as a means to sort of purge. So a lot of people get quite confused about what purging actually means. It doesn't have to mean throwing up, or it doesn't necessarily have to come after a binge. But for me, whenever I would overeat, not necessarily binge, but eat to a point where I felt quite sick, my solution was to take a laxative to get it out, to reduce as much sort of water weight in me as possible so that I could alleviate any of the concerns that I had around what I had just eaten, because I was always very guilty around a lot of the food choices that I would make. Even though I didn't actually restrict myself from food groups, there was still a lot of restrictive behaviors and limitations there.
And then, like you said, heaps of cardio as well. So that's, I think a lot of people miss the mark there as well. Like with understanding is that it doesn't just need to be not eating or throwing up, like purging. It can be, you might eat, a certain amount of calories, but then you're, to counteract that or lose weight, you're running 10Ks a day, 15Ks a day. Like, and which is actually like, and as a coach, you see those trends in people, and you try to bring it up. But yeah, like there's a very big spectrum to it. And it's quite scary because it can be hard to catch as well. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
So you recognize the issue, you have end up to a gym, you're trying to, start your process of recovery. Did you get into any therapy or anything as well?
I've actually been seeing the same psychologist for around 6 years-ish now. So I'm very, grateful for that. There have obviously been periods where I haven't been as adherent to seeing a psychologist, but, we all go through ebbs and flows. But at the same time, feel very grateful for having had the courage to delve into that path, because it is quite challenging to sort of admit that you need extra help. And yeah, so at that time I was seeing a psychologist. We were working through a lot of the issues that I was experiencing. But it also comes down to whether or not you feel ready to implement the changes. And
100%. I was just curious if that was part of your recovery plan.
Yes, it was.
So we've got to the gym now. I'm going to stop interrupting here. I'll let you take the floor. You just signed up to a gym, first day in the gym. Let's go, and then talking to how you got into bodybuilding and everything.
Yes.
So, take the floor.
It was probably around a year before I decided to invest in coaches. So up until that point, I was doing everything myself. I'm very much so the type of personality, though, to sort of when I start something, I sort of dive in head first and I sort of throw myself into the environment. So I got myself a plan, training program. I was like YouTubing exercises. I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything as correctly as possible. And I think I did a pretty decent job on my own before I got my first coaches. And so it wasn't until the following year, which I think was the middle of 2019, maybe. Yes, that sounds about right. It's a little bit confusing with COVID now because I'm confused.
Right, we lost so many years. I still feel robbed that I'm 30 next year. I was like, no, I'm
so
27.
Confused. Yes, exactly. So yeah, in mid 2019, I invested in some bodybuilding coaches because I wanted to not necessarily compete at bodybuilding at the time, but I wanted to make sure that I had the right nutritional guidance, the right training guidance, and assistance to make sure that I could sort of build my body up from being very fragile, meek, to one that was strong and robust and just really healthy. And some of the sort of benchmarks that I had for assessing coaches was that I always wanted to be able to have control over my own food. I didn't want to follow a meal plan. I wanted to be able to flexibly diet. And I also wanted to make sure that the coaches that I invested in would prioritize my health no matter what. So I landed Jane Boothby and Logan Robson, who I love to death. They are like my surrogate parents. I love them so much. Still to this day, they are the most fantastic coaches I have ever worked with, save for my partner. But in terms of bodybuilding, Papa Glutes, but great powerlifting coach. But for bodybuilding, I honestly lucked out, and they are so amazing. And it wasn't until the end of 2019 where I decided, you know what? Let's do a bodybuilding show. And I talked to Anthony a little bit about this off air with regards to why I made the decision to do that. And I think at this point with where I am now, I've realized that I never pursued bodybuilding because I inherently wanted to. I did it because at the time I was generating some more attention on social media, and I had a lot of people telling me, oh, you'll do fantastic at this sport, you really succeed, your quads are huge, you should do it. And the pressure from everyone around me really put me in this very unusual predicament that I hadn't been in before, and I felt quite obligated to participate in bodybuilding. So I started my first prep for the WBFF, and I have to be honest, the prep was one of the most enjoyable processes I actually had ever gone through. It was really enjoyable. At no point did I feel restricted or limited by food. I thoroughly enjoyed my training. It was a really, really enjoyable process leading up to the cancellation. So because in the middle of 2020, we had the spicy Rona come and destroy our lives, my competition was cancelled. Yes. So my competition was cancelled 6 weeks out, and combining brutal.
How long did you prep? Sorry, how long was the prep?
Up until that point, I think it was 16 weeks.
Oof, yeah, it's a long time to like have the pin pulled on you.
Yeah, and so it was incredibly frustrating. I was distraught naturally, because I had set myself up for this big event that I was completely committed to. It was the only thing that I was really focusing on at the time, and to then have that taken away from me, plus then having the gym taken away from me, not being able to train, not being able to achieve my designated goals, everything fell apart. And it was at that point when things went downhill very, very quickly. I actually dug up some journal writing that I did during that time, because I thought it might actually be really interesting to like read.
And we get this rare insight into where you were at that time, right?
Yeah, it was like. I wrote this. I think this was like the beginning of May in 2020, And it was, I think I titled this piece Isolation Day. I don't know, because we're in the depths of Rona at this point. And I had said, as a first-time competitor, reverse dieting has really gotten to my head. Even though I never got comp shredded, quote unquote, because I was still 6 weeks out when I found out my competition was cancelled, I still feel like this post-comp phase has hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't look at myself in the mirror anymore without picking myself apart, without thinking that I'm not enough. My glutes aren't big enough, my shoulders aren't capped enough, my quads don't have enough definition, my waist isn't small enough, and so on, until I've forgotten why I even looked at myself in the mirror in the first place. Sometimes I think that not good enough feeling is worse than a blanket feeling of I'm too fat, or I'm too skinny, or I'm just too much. There is something more sinister in my head about a pervasive and long-term dissatisfaction that lingers like a heavy cloud that wants to drown you. There's my little writing spiel.
It's just looking in the mirror and tearing yourself up to shreds, like daily, right? That's horrible. Horrible place to be in.
Such deep and distressing body dysmorphia at that time. I didn't take any photos of myself for months because I was so dissatisfied with the way I looked, and it was every few grams of weight on the scale was just immeasurably distressing. And no amount of prep can prepare you for that initial reverse dieting period post-comp. It's especially when, you know, the goal of a reverse diet is to maintain as much of your lean physique as possible. And in your head as the competitor, nothing can compare to that original lean physique. And I was so proud of the physique that I ended up with, that I had some photo shoots done at the end of that time to celebrate what I had built. And I was so happy with it. So then every bit of weight, bit of water that was added onto that was like, it was disgusting to me. I didn't want it there. I couldn't cope with it. And I also had my routine taken away from me as well. So I had, I trained, I ate, I worked, I slept, and I posed. That was all that I ever did during that period of time. And to then having so much time to just think about my own mental headspace, to just spend so much extra time with myself was very alarming. That was then compounded by not feeling good enough, not feeling adequate in my body, not feeling like I could appreciate myself. And it took a good 6 to 8 months to pull myself out of that.
And do you find, sorry, I've question that just popped in, but I am going to assume it. Unfortunately, the answer is probably yes. But do you find, because you are lean and muscular and, athletic, do you find people are less sympathetic to you?
I actually wrote this down. I
right?
honestly did.
Yeah, because
you're absolutely right.
And on a different level, even with me, I have really bad body dysmorphia, and I hate looking at I was the only guy at Pro who didn't take my shirt off, and I'm objectively, I know I'm muscular, but then I look in the mirror, I'm nah, but I've got love handles, and I can't ever, or I've got shoulder hair, I can't, and or my biceps aren't big enough for my arms, and so I'll never take my shirt off, I'll never wear a singlet around people, and but people just look at me like I'm an idiot because I'm big, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And yeah. I can only imagine that would have been many times more intense and more full on for you. That's horrible. But please explain.
It's like you read my mind, because the next paragraph in my journal is literally about how I felt so ridiculous because I wrote, I'm a skinny white girl with an acceptable body and I'm complaining that I have body image issues. What the hell? Why am I complaining? Why do I feel so inadequate? And I literally wrote subsequently, I can hear certain groups of people laughing at me again, thinking, what does she have to complain about? I think that also, it made it harder at the time to talk publicly about the way I felt and to be open and honest about, the way that I perceived myself at that period of time. So I felt very guilty for the way that I was feeling. And I didn't have a right to feel that way. And
isolated because you can't very open up to people. So
yeah.
And I think that's really, because and it's horrible, right? Because we know mental health doesn't discriminate. But then as soon as you make it about a physique or a body, I think people, like you said, if you do fit into what people call an ideal or, or how can you not like yourself? Look at you. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you would feel like you can't open up and you can't talk about it, which just make healing and recovery so much harder.
And what a lot of people don't quite understand is that, or at least struggle to understand, is that your body image has absolutely nothing to do with your actual body and everything to do with how you perceive your body. So it doesn't matter what you actually look like. We will all experience body issues at some point in our lives, and they're not dependent on the way we actually physically, tangibly look.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm more self-conscious now than when I was a super heavyweight. At 145 back in the day. You know what I mean? But it was because, like, I expect more of myself now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, no, it's a really good comment. Good, like, I'm glad you phrased it like that. So you said 6 to 8 months, that was really tough there. How did you, just quickly, because then I know I've got the next thing, which is I want to talk about, and I've seen the comments on your social media, which is horrible, but what was it, who helped you, what helped you get out of it, the spiral this time, the thought loop, whatever you call it, like the disordered eating, the body dysmorphia, what helped you? I'm sure you still, like, I know you, like, you will have days where you still struggle with it. Sometimes it might be weeks, sometimes you might have great weeks, you know what I mean? But what helped you through this really rough patch? What got you out of that, or helped you start getting out of that?
I'm so thankful for my incredible partner, who at that time, when I was very, very depressed, never gave up on me. I ended up going on medication for my depression and anxiety, which I think was a huge turning point in also making me able to actually have time and the mental real estate to develop some proper coping mechanisms, which I didn't have before. I went back to my psychologist. That helped a ton. And my coaches at the time, Jane and Logan, they were really in my corner. They were always there to encourage me and remind me that, my body isn't the be and end all. I'm not, that's not who I am. I'm so much more than just my body, as we all are. So having a really great support system around me was essential. And it definitely really helped me sort of ease out of that situation. And although it took a lot of time, it was something that I learned a lot about myself from. So I don't regret going through that experience. But I think I could have, as a coach, it's definitely helped me a lot in terms of the knowledge that I now have to impart on my own clients and the girls that I tend to work with as well. I probably do regret a little bit trying to compete a second time.
Was this after that 6 to 8 months?
Yes. So I decided to compete again, to try again, the following year, which was also cancelled by COVID in the end. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm not trying a third time. It's just not happening. But I think I could have done without it. I don't think I was genuinely ready, or I hadn't healed enough from that experience.
I do remember probably when we started talking more, right? Because you put up a story like about not being where you were, or not feeling like you were in the last prep at the same time. So 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out, you felt like you were way leaner last time in that. And we had a conversation. I'm sure many people messaged you about it, but I remember having a conversation with you about it, and just, the circumstances were completely different. You're in a lockdown, like, it's not tit for tat. You can't just compare yourself to you a year ago. Like, and this is something I always tell, and this is not just with bodybuilding, right? And physique, it's with everything. You can't, like, as much as, you're like, I've done the work, I've done the same things, your life isn't the same. And that impacts your physique, your training, your strength. So I do remember that. I remember that prep is when I think we started talking more.
I definitely didn't realize how much my current lifestyle then impacted the way that I would respond to prep. Like, I had just started my honors degree. I had just launched my business. I was doing a lot. And now something that I also I remind my clients a lot of the time is our lifestyles will also dictate whether or not we're ready to diet, or ready to cut, or ready to do anything, achieve anything. We have to be in the right circumstance to be able to, achieve certain goals in our lives.
Yeah, and when you're prepping, like, especially for bodybuilding and in powerlifting, but more so bodybuilding because of the calorie restriction, getting so lean, like, your body, something I always explain, your body only knows stress. and where it doesn't know where, like, you know, it doesn't care where that stress is coming from. So you're doing your honors, you've started a new business, you know, a new coaching business, and you're doing really well, you know, and so, but getting that off the ground, like, I know what getting a coaching business off the ground is like. It's brutal. And then, you know, you've got 10 clients that just came on and you're writing 10 new programs, getting used to calls and that. And then you're trying to do a prep, like your body's just like, oh, you know, what's happening? A lot different to like, and this is why, you know, when people go, oh, but you lift this much. And I go, well, man, I like own a gym. I sleep 9 hours a night. Of course, like I'm a lot stronger than I used to be. And that's the thing, like, you know, it's a lot of stress to add in to then try to prep through, which is brutal on the body and can take months to recover from. Yeah, so it's no wonder that there was that different response from your body. Your body's like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, my body's like, I don't want to go through this stress. You've already got enough going on. I don't know what stress is coming from where. I don't know how to respond to this.
Like, slow down, focus on your PhD. Like
literally, yeah.
So you did that second prep, comp got cancelled. Really unfortunate, sorry. That sucks. But we got you into powerlifting, so I'm not that sorry. So, and that's where we switched to this, right? You got into powerlifting, and with that, I would say, I know it's been a journey, and you know, you can go into that if you want, but you know, you are heavier now.
Yes.
So what were you weighing at the end of your bodybuilding prep or towards the end?
At the end of my bodybuilding prep, I was weighing around 57 kilos. And now I'm averaging around 66. So I have gone from such complete ends of the spectrum, from 45 kilos
very
to 66.
Muscular 66
Thank
kilos,
you very
right?
much.
5 foot, super jacked. Like, you know, they're going to have photos of you up here, like super jacked. Like, you know, you second comp, you just squatted 152 and bench 77. Like, big numbers. Going to be a very, like, someone asked the other day, who's a junior lifter or a young lifter to watch out for? I should have said you because I didn't respond to the story.
You.
No, but legitimately, like, I think you're going to have a very, very good powerlifting career. But you switched, you've gone up the weight class, you've gone up to 66, and before you used to post, you know, you did the photo shoots, which all the power to you, like, and they came out really well, and you post those, like, and you were posting them quite regularly when you first did them, right? Which isn't a bad thing, but then, you know, like, you switched, you're 9 kilos up, and you've obviously, not all of your followers, but because a lot of people follow you, like myself, for your talks on body image and stuff, and you're just a good coach. But you had people following you because they like bodybuilding, they like your physique when you're bodybuilding, and then you switched. I know there's been negative kickback on that with, like, comments, messages, and even just, like, your engagement online and you've got a fair few followers, right? And you noticed a big change. So, like, what were the biggest things you noticed? What was the most egregious stuff that got commented? If you want, like, send me a photo of it and I'll put it up here. Yeah, let's go into that, because that's something I think people don't really think about.
It
right?
seems
Has that affected your
frivolous
brand?
Sometimes, because I'm like, I don't want to care that I've lost followers, but at the same time, I do sometimes, just because it's a little frustrating that, you know, the people that follow me actually for a significant period of time only followed me because they liked the way I looked. And I've had a lot of comments. This is probably I've had the most negative comments this year regarding my body that I've ever had, ever. I've even had people come up to me in the gym and make comment about, oh, your legs aren't as conditioned as they used to be. What happened to your quads? I wish you would go back to the way you were. And
I'm going to put a photo of you up right now up here too, by the way, just so people can see.
I can only just respond by, like, rolling my eyes, because I don't understand where the audacity comes from to even say that.
It's not your right.
I know.
Like,
it's like, believe me, I know I've gained weight. I know I'm not as conditioned as I once was. And technically, yes, I am heavier than I was a year ago, but I don't need you to tell me that. I live in this body. I know that. And commenting on someone else's body is like telling someone with chronic acne, oh, you have pimples. No shit. They know that.
It's really messed up. It's like a huge sense of self-entitlement. But the thing is, like, I don't assess other people's bodies in general. Like, I don't walk around thinking, oh, they've put on weight, oh, they've lost weight, or they've done. So, but then to have the audacity to then go up and comment, it's like, you've thought about it, you've recognized the thought, and then you've let it bypass your filter, and you've gone, hey, you know what Corinne needs today? Needs to be a comment on her body, like, you know, randomly in the gym. Like, it's just such a weird idea, but I guess it's that, not that it's right, but people start looking at you less as Corinne, the human being, and you're Corinne, the Instagram person. Do you know what I mean? You're like, people forget that you're a human, a person that has a life
and feelings.
And your feelings, and you're not just a picture on Instagram or a post on Insta, and it's almost dehumanizing.
I feel like I'm constantly, not so much at the moment, but as I transitioned from bodybuilding into powerlifting, I felt like I was constantly reminded that I'm not a bodybuilder, quote unquote, anymore. And while I acknowledge now that my values and lifestyle don't align with that, my former stage ready physique, I still find myself, grieving my old body sometimes. It's a process to sort of give up something that you, one, worked so hard for, but two, also desperately tried to preserve for such a long period of time. But it's, the reminders of, oh, you've gained weight, oh, you're looking a bit heavy. Not very necessary. Thank you, human beings. But it's one of those things where I've said this before as well. Powerlifting lights a fire in me the way that bodybuilding never did. I love powerlifting so much. The strength, the adrenaline, I feel so empowered. I love the aggression. I love stepping on the platform. It's so just invigorating. And at no point during my bodybuilding prep did I ever feel so powerful. If anything, I felt lesser, more subject to comparison, weaker, and I had a lot of thoughts around insufficiency and inadequacy. Whereas regardless of what numbers I'm hitting compared to somebody else, I know that I'm always going to be able to surpass my own limits and do better than I did last time. You always walk away from powerlifting having gained something. Whereas when you walk away from bodybuilding, you gain discipline, you gain an experience, but you don't necessarily win at anything. I don't have to place first in a powerlifting comp to feel like I won. Knowing that I was able to put 30 kilos on my total at Pro Raw from my previous comp at only my second competition made me feel like I won.
It's huge. And also it's not subjective. It is or it isn't. You
hit the weight or you don't.
Yeah, like, very rare you get dodgy judging, but even then, you know what I mean? Like, and I could never do bodybuilding. I could not stand the idea of someone just sitting there and judging my physique and whether that wins or not. They're like, no, you're not good enough. That would be brutal. Like, it'd be very damaging, I say, for a lot of people, right? Power, I do find, I mean, look, people like to say powerlifting's great if you have body image issues and that. I don't tend to agree entirely. Like, people are very accepting. We got weight class and that, but I do think we still tend to obsess about it because we are a weight class sport and stuff. But, like you said, it's measurable. The progress is measurable. It's not subjective. So you notice that there is a difference online, which I will say will come back up and a lot more positive because you are so strong. Sorry, I'm drinking Coke Zero. I muted my mic really quick. And you've had random people comment and stuff and message, and you've posted those. What does that say? This is my super chill segue into, what does that say about like diet culture? And I've got written here, diet culture, feminism, PhD.
Good segue. I like it.
Right. Smooth, right? No one will notice. I'm going to let you take it away on that because we started talking about this. So we started talking about this at the start. Just as as I set up, because I was 20 minutes behind, like always. And we were talking just about how her PhD, Corinne's PhD, postmodern.
You're so close, but not quite.
What is it?
Post-human
feminism.
There you go.
How that ties in a lot with like diet culture and expectations on, females and stuff like that and women. I'm just going to let you talk about that. There's my
absolutely
topic.
Well done. I'm very proud of your segue there.
Post-human feminism.
Yeah, in a very peculiar way, I never expected my PhD to have such a profound influence on the way that I would coach or the way that I would respond to body image issues with a lot of my clients as well. But there is a big crossover. Women are expected to present themselves in a very specific way. We are expected to embody this ideal form of femininity, which is predominantly white, thin, able-bodied, and there was another one that I had referenced in our earlier conversation, but it's passed me down. But straight. That is it exactly.
Cis.
If you're a white, thin, cisgendered woman, you are in an acceptable body. You are going to succeed very well in society. If you fall outside those parameters, however, you are most likely going to be marginalized, othered, treated as lesser in very systematic ways. And when it comes to the relationship between the female body and how we are also recognizing our perception on social media, it's like we are taught that our bodies are our worth, and we have to go through this very meticulous unlearning process of deconstructing the internalized belief that my body equals my worth. For me personally, as long as I can remember, my worth and whether I was good enough was always dependent on something. It wasn't necessarily always my body, but I was always preoccupied with, my worth being dependent on something other than me just existing. During high school and my late adolescence, I was led to believe that if I didn't achieve straight A's in school, that I wasn't worthy. Once I left school and was more exposed to social media, I found myself believing that if I didn't have a thigh gap, washboard abs, or like a perky peach, I also wasn't good enough.
Such a weird trend, the thigh gap. Sorry,
I know, it really was. And as human beings, we seem to be really good at finding new avenues to exercise our not good enoughness. It just persists in very pervasive and weird ways. But the good news, aside from that though, is that, subscribing to the belief that your body equals your worth is a learned behavior. We weren't, born believing that we weren't enough. We weren't born hating ourselves or discriminating against ourselves. We weren't born with this sexualized aesthetic understanding of the body. We've been socially conditioned to believe that this X body is beautiful, sexy, worthy, and that anything else outside those neatly defined parameters is ugly and unworthy. And it's none of our fault. It's not our fault that we have this negative body image a lot of the time. We've derived meaning about ourselves from this really disgusting sociocultural interpretation of our bodies. And if our body image is a learned behavior, it's something that we can deconstruct, compartmentalize, and change. When we look at the mirror, we don't necessarily need to love ourselves or love every part of ourselves. It's really hard to a lot of the time. But if we can look at ourselves and respect that our body just is, appreciate our body for just existing rather than it needing to be or look like any specific thing, that is so much more valuable, I think, in the long term, being able to recognize that our perceptions are often deceptive, and that what we see in the mirror isn't always, it's definitely not the reflection of who we are on the inside. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, we don't get to see, the way that we laugh, or the way that we express kindness, or the way that we interact with others, the way that we show love to our family members. So much of who we are is not bottled in our bodies, and we need to consistently strive to tear away that correlation, because the two don't deserve to coincide.
That was amazing.
Thanks. I got a little excited.
That was that's an amazing way to explain it, and really good. That was really good. And I think you're entirely right. And I think everyone's going to agree with you there. But it is hard to unlearn, right? And it takes time, and people are going to struggle with that. But yeah, I just don't have a response.
That's okay.
For once, that was really like, for once I don't have words because like I was so engrossed in what you were saying.
Thank you.
That was really good.
I think it.
I'm going to send you that.
Thank you.
Just that video for you to post because that, woof.
I get so fired up about this conversation. I think you can very much so see that because it really frustrates me the way that women and men are expected to present certain versions of themselves, that we are supposed to adhere to a set image of how we are supposed to be. But even in that, we're not supposed to be anything. We're just meant to show up. We're not supposed to have, chiseled jawlines and washboard abs and super like jacked bodies all the time. We come in so many different shapes and sizes, and we can't be expected to just fit one mold. It's just so frustrating.
And that's, like, I was saying before about someone in my personal life is like, I'm not attractive because I'm not skinny. And they don't look at people and go, oh, look, they're heavier or, and they're unattractive. But for them, they're like, no, I can't be attractive unless I'm this very specific. But it was, and again, a lot of that comes from the way they were raised and just what they're exposed to. Same as myself, like I don't think I can be attractive unless I have big muscles and I'm lean. You know what I mean? Like,
it's that body dysmorphia again.
Right, and it is really a lot. Like, look at what people are exposed to, like when they're growing up and stuff. Like, it is, learned. It is a learned behavior, unfortunately, and it's like it's hard to unlearn that. But I think we're working on it slowly.
We're doing a decent job. I think there are some fantastic people in the anti-diet space, and I'm not completely anti-diet. That's not who I am, but I definitely believe that if our goal with regards to changing our body comes from a place of self-deprecation or self-loathing or just a goal to fix something as though our bodies are a problem, that's something that we need to address before we go down the path of dieting. But there are some just really fantastic people in the industry who are advocating for body neutrality, body acceptance.
Anyone you'd like to just tell everyone about quickly?
Mackenzie Baker, Shannon Beer, I don't know his full name, but A-Rod Nutrition. There are just some amazing people. Kenzie Brenner. I'm
gonna put these up on here.
They're all amazing people that I think you should all reach out to and have really gentle approaches to nutrition. And they're not all nutritionists or coaches, but they're individuals who have a very brilliant way of articulating how we should go about pursuing progression in a very gentle way, and also how we can consistently unlearn these behaviors that have been ingrained in us from a young age.
Good resources and people to follow, like positive to follow. Something you said, I don't remember exactly what you said, but when you were talking, got thinking, just how you're more than your body. Like you don't need to be a certain way, and you're more than just your body and your physique. I don't know why I was thinking about it. Just how this famous actor, when she turned 18 on a radio station, they were like, oh, well, now she's legal. And she did a really big post about it. She's like, how messed up's that? That they were waiting for her to be 18 and that's all she is to these people. And anyway, I was just thinking what was on my brain. So with that, is there anything else you want to add to that, or do you want to answer the questions we got?
Let's answer the questions.
Let's answer the questions. All right. Do you have them written down, or am I going to read them out to you? I'll read them out.
I think you're going to read them out.
All right. Well, I think you've answered this one in the, I don't want to say, but it's not a podcast kind of podcast thing. What did body image / disordered eating recovery look like for you? I think you answered that at the start really well. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, or are you happy with what we covered?
I think I've said probably everything that I wanted to say, although during the process of recovery for me, in hindsight, I think I would have liked to consult a registered dietitian, which I didn't at the time, but I think that's probably something I would encourage a lot of individuals to do who are going through the process of recovery, or at least making sure that they have someone in their corner who is at least somewhat experienced with handling body image issues, disordered eating, so that you have someone that you can bounce off and connect with in a way that's not as potentially objective and as one-sided as therapy, because obviously in therapy sessions you don't really have the opportunity to necessarily connect with someone through their own personal experience, whereas if you're talking to someone who has been through that same route as you before or something similar, it's really nice to get that feedback from.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. I like that. Yeah, because I think the general, what do people say? Go see a psychologist, go see a therapist.
It's not always the best option necessarily.
Yeah. That's someone more specialized, and that understands. 2, how to fight against the societal belief that skinny is best.
Big
skinny
question.
in quotes. Yeah, big question.
Big question. Oh, I'm actually going to partially throw it over to you briefly, because I'm also particularly curious about how you've, as a coach, if you have or not, ever noticed this in any of your clients.
Have
you ever noticed with your clients that they have the perception that they need to embody a specific image, or with like your loved ones that they need to embody a specific image, and how you have responded as a support system or as a coach around that?
It is a big question, right? And of course, you're a coach as well. Like, you deal with that, and you definitely try to help people with that. One, as a coach, I mean, it sounds cliche, right? But learning and helping people learn to celebrate what the body can do, not just how you look. And this is why powerlifting is awesome for this stuff. But I always someone might put on a couple kilos and they're weighing for weight class, or they might just be focused on wanting to get skinny at the start. But when they start training and they have those measurable metrics, it's slow, but it does happen. Is they do start to learn to appreciate, or my experience, they learn to appreciate what their body does. Like, oh my god, I just squatted 140. Like, I never thought I'd do that. Or I just benched 100 kilos, or 80 or 70 or 40. It doesn't matter. They start looking at their body of less of something just to be looked at, and it's this amazing thing that can do these huge tasks that they're asking of it. Segueing people into that is my go-to as a coach, and just talking about it. And we celebrate all lifters and all weight classes and everything at Apex. So having good role models like that as well helps. And I do notice it does help a lot of people. They again, because they are slowly unlearning this idea that it's just something to look at and something to please other people or other people's eyes and stuff. And then with people in my personal life, and when they don't lift, it can be a little bit harder, right? Because
I think I have a good one for this one then.
Yeah, okay, you take over.
In that case, like, something that I have gotten a lot of my clients do, and something that I've done as well, is like this is practice rationalization. And I would ask anyone listening, if they've ever gone through any of these issues, to just take some time, whip out a pen and paper or just on your phone, and ask yourself the following question. Ask yourself, what would it mean for you to have your perfect body? What would it actually do for you? And, this question may honestly help put your body image pursuits into perspective, because I highly doubt that you'll be able to write down many, if any, rational responses. I know that I couldn't the first time I tried this little activity. It really allowed me to reflect upon what I actually wanted to believe, as opposed to the beliefs that I had ingrained in myself for a really long time. And then also rewriting your story, create your real truth rather than conforming to these false beliefs marketed and sold to you by our culture. None of it's real. None of it is honest. None of it is tangible. None of it really means anything. You might start reinforcing certain beliefs through affirmations, such as no body is better than another, or stomachs come in all shapes and sizes, because this is your story and your body is reflective of it's not necessarily reflective of anything. It just exists as it does because it's just part of you. But it, reflects so much more than just what you see on the outside. It's, our bodies hold our hearts, our souls, our stomachs. Our bodies allow us to run and play. Our bodies give us hands to hold our loved ones, our stomachs are a source of enjoying food and pleasure, and as women, we have the opportunity to give life. There's so much that our bodies give for us, as opposed to, you know, what they just look like and just exist doing.
Yeah, 100%. And like something that I think helps a lot as well is like rationalizing with people. So I'd be like, I find like this is, again, my experience, people in my personal life, but you'll be like, their only expectation on the only person that is really expecting that of themselves, at least in their immediate, sorry, I'm cramping. Oh, my hamstrings, both of them. I did my first lower body. That was horrible. I did my first lower body session yesterday since COVID, like proper one.
Oh gosh.
Ooh, my legs are out straight. I forgot what I was going to say. So
Rationalizing.
Oh yeah, just like, you know, under. Again.
It's still happening.
Yeah, my legs are out. I was just going to keep them out straight. You know, I just asked him, like, do you look at other people and make these assessments or these judgments? Do you go, they're too big, they're too small, they're too, you know, their hips are too big, and they're like, oh no, never.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Well, people, you know, most people aren't doing that to you. Like, obviously, like on your social media, there's some people that do that, but I think the majority of people aren't walking around just assessing everyone, right?
Yeah, we also need to treat ourselves the way we treat others, which we very rarely do. We don't, you know, display ourselves with the same. Sorry, we don't treat ourselves with the same kindness or respect that we do with our best friends or our loved ones.
Yeah.
We are so hard and volatile with ourselves. It's almost mildly like, we're just like fascist towards ourselves. We're so mean. It's like it doesn't have a rational explanation either. But we do need to start being a little bit more kind and show ourselves the same respect that we do with others. If we were to actually do that, we probably would have a far better relationship with ourselves too.
Yeah, and yeah, it's being about like they're super critical. You know, people get super self-critical of themselves, which sucks.
Which we all do, yes, from time to time.
Number 3, how to reconcile. How to reconcile with being content with your body and also wanting to change it. You know, so yeah, I guess like being like, hey, I like my body, like I like my physique, but you know, I want to progress, I want to change, I want to look a little, I want to add more muscle.
Yeah, this is something
like
I did struggle for a while. Coming to terms with, you know, wanting to respect my body and show it kindness and let it just exist, but also sometimes wanting to make a change. And I did speak on this briefly about, you know, as long as we are approaching body changes from the perspective of not necessarily it coming from self-deprecation or self-loathing, as long as we don't, it's the decision to make those changes isn't coming from a place of self-hatred, that's fine. If it was, we would need to reevaluate the decision to make those body changes. However, sometimes it's just enjoyable to watch your body change and go through different phases. And it's important to remember that our bodies are always in flux. Our bodies are always going to change. We're not going to sit at the same weight with the same composition for the rest of our lives. We'll continuously go through different waves. But it's important to actually, you know, not necessarily love, but show neutrality towards ourselves during those periods of time. Because if we can consistently be content with ourselves while going through various changes, I think that's kind of the be it and end all. That's what we really want to achieve at the end of the day, is to acknowledge that changes can happen and that welcome those changes when they do, because it's fine that certain changes will occur, but also respect that we are who we are, and we deserve the same love and appreciation and respect as we do any other day of the week.
They're getting some good responses.
I hope so.
Yeah, you're answering these perfectly. Number 4, how do you feel the stigma around strong women is changing? Is it still, in quotes, niche?
I think it's really dependent on the angle that you're looking into this industry from, because in certain sectors of the fitness industry and like health and wellness, being a strong, robust, muscular woman is still not normal. But obviously in our bubble, it's very welcome. It's very, it's not niche in our sector of the world, but you know, there are so many different areas of fitness that we aren't privy to, that we don't engage with. So it's very hard to also determine whether or not that's true. That being said, I do think there's a stronger appreciation for strong, muscular women nowadays than there were before. When I started posting on social media, it was not very welcome. Looking the way that I do now was not an idealized or well-respected body shape to have. It was something that was considered only for bodybuilders or only for, like strong men or whatever. I was never privy to powerlifting when I first started, so that was all that I had seen. But I think there are still definitely sectors and spaces within the fitness industry that it's not super welcome. It's a tough one, I think, because it is very dependent on what we are exposed to, and because I've done such I think a good job at curating my environment and who I spend time with, I never end up feeling like my body is abnormal. If anything, I feel like I am the least natural when I step out of the fitness space. When I step into public life in my normal everyday clothing, that's when I feel the most uncomfortable or feel like I'm unusual. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, and you get it, right? So Danny always points it out. Like, if I go to Coles or if I go somewhere in a singlet, people just stare.
Yeah.
And they'll look and they'll talk, and it's not, and I'm big, I'm not freakishly big, but it's not the norm.
Yeah, I don't feel like my quads are that extreme, but I'll go out in shorts and I'll walk down a street and my partner will point out how many people have stopped and looked and stared at me or made comment to whoever they're with.
Yeah.
It's really quite unusual, and it's not something that you necessarily will we won't necessarily consciously experience it, but then others watching us and watching people engage with us will experience that and then relay that to us.
Yeah, and I get it. If I go past bars, just a month or two ago, we went to the movies and some dude came up. He's like, "Dude, you're massive." He was smashed. He's like, "You're so big." And then obviously adding the big beard, and you really stand out.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, it definitely happens, but I just think that's because it's outside of the norm for. You forget, like you said, we're in the industry, we're around lifters all the time, we're at the gym all the time, you're a coach. You forget that, there's not everyone's like that. The majority of people don't do what we do.
That's right. And I think it's in that acknowledging that as well is really important because, the way that we look, our bodies are really geared towards our sport at this point. The way that we function and the way that we train, the way that we eat is all geared towards making ourselves as performance focused as possible. We want to be able to lift the most weight on our squat, bench, and deadlift. That's all that we're really aiming for at this point. And so people who aren't striving for those same goals will not look like us, will not share a similar physique or have the density or muscle size that we do. So it is a really tricky sort of question to answer because it is, again, like I said, really dependent on the sort of group that you're involved in. There's obviously a large space for different, there's a large Pilates focus on Instagram or social media and fitness in different areas, and you're not going to see someone who looks like me in Pilates.
Yeah, someone asked, I wanted to do yoga, and I was just like, I'm just going to stand out so much, and I'm going to be so behind. I'm not going to be able to touch my knees, let alone my toe. So I just didn't go because I was like, oh yeah, it's not my thing. That's a good response, and I think, definitely, it's big. If you surround yourself in the industry, you're not going to feel like an outlier. At least I hope you don't. But then, when you venture out, but I think it's abnormal to people on all levels. It's like they think the same about bodybuilders, CrossFitters, and everything. It's hard to understand. This person did ask another question, and I'm just going to see if I have it here because it leads on from this. Sorry, guys.
Oh, it was about superheroes, wasn't it?
Yeah, point of view. Female superheroes in movies are tiny versus built males. Why can't we normalize built females? Well, there's true. A little sign.
Yeah. There are a lot of female superheroes are always quite svelte, conditioned, toned, petite. And that's the sort of, again, playing on the ideal representation of women you want. You'll notice a lot of the women in superhero Marvel movies or DC really in those sort of tight bodysuit, latex, really cinched waist, big boobs, big bum, almost playing on a version of Kim Kardashian in a strange way, but obviously more athletic. Sorry, sounds a bit rude in a way, but you're right. It's a very specific body that is presented in film as, again, the most ideal frame. But it's also important to recognize that, no one, generally speaking, unless you're a mildly genetic freak, will achieve that naturally. Like, you won't be able to have the big bum, the cinched waist, the big glutes, also be super athletic and achieving all these different cross interfering parameters. Like, it just doesn't work like that in practice. But, obviously these images that we're presented with are constructed as the almost like male-centered preference that we have for what woman should look like. Whereas in reality, that's just not how it works. And it is a little bit frustrating sometimes. It would be nice to see a woman on screen who is more muscular generally, as opposed to being this very specific model of femininity.
So you've got these people you want to do really crazy athletic things, but you don't want them to look like an athlete. Like, oh no, we can't have that. Like, we want them to do all the crazy athletic stuff. But they got to
look like a supermodel at the same time.
Yeah, no, muscle. Like, no.
It's still too masculine.
Yeah.
See, again, like in cinema, that's like the mainstream, right? Like, muscularity hasn't breached the mainstream. It is still quite niche for both. I was going to say for both men and women, but that's really not true anymore. We've now reached the point where men on screen are just super yoked.
Like, all the time. It went from like that athletic, like, was it that Zac Efron looked really lean but not super big, and then
it was reasonable.
And then it started getting to like, you got like Chris Hemsworth at like 100 kilos shredded. And you're like, well, okay, it's getting big now. Like, they're turning, that Arnold era is coming back.
Yeah, it is. And that in itself is becoming more mainstream. So it's like, well, if that in itself is sort of slowly transitioning where we have like really muscular men, but at the same time, you can't just be muscular. You have to be shredded to the bone in order for that to be realistic. You've got your abs visible on the outside of your superhero suits.
Yeah,
like, you can't, true. It's not just flat. It's must have abs cut into the suit. And again, super unreasonable. It's like, okay, so we're going to promote two very extreme sides of the spectrum. We've almost got like bodybuilder-esque superhero men who are clearly juiced up versus very petite, corseted women with unrealistic proportions.
And they're the two things you'll get.
This is all we're getting at the minute, and this is I suppose just speaks volumes about mainstream cinema, and also the way that cinema reflects sort of the sociocultural standards that we have for the time. But of course, we also feed into that because we go and watch them, we enjoy them, we have a good time with it. Because sometimes it's a good script, it's a good story, but we don't necessarily critique it enough or pick apart the parts that do make us uncomfortable or do actually have quite a negative effect on society as a whole.
Yeah, it can be damaging
a little bit.
Yeah, give me so much to think about today. Last question. Body image differences between men and women? That was the question.
Go on.
I'm letting you take the lead on this one. You're doing so well. This is about you. Gosh. I told you that from the start.
I know, but men and women, you're the only other male here.
Yeah, so okay, you can start and I'll add in a little bit that doesn't really make sense because my meds wear off, so I just ramble now.
Let's ramble. I don't think there are as many body image differences between men and women as sometimes it may be chalked up to be. I think that in some respect, women are probably a little bit more open about the effects of negative body image issues than men are. I think there is a perception around, or a stereotype, I should say, that really just sticks in terms of men not speaking about their emotions, not being open and vulnerable, whereas women are typically a little bit more, I guess, emotionally available to do so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't experience the same negative side effects from body image issues. We've both spoken about how we've gone through body dysmorphia, and that manifests in similar ways. A lot of women will typically experience body dysmorphia in the sense of not being small enough. But for me, I've always experienced it in the sense of not being big enough, which is quite unusual. And trying to relate that to other women, I've always found quite hard. But then I also have never really been able to connect with other men about it either, because no one wants to talk about it. So I'm not sure what your take on that is. I know that you've, like I said, I know you've gone through bouts of body dysmorphia, and it still pops up now from time to time. Hopefully not as pervasive as it used to be.
It's pretty bad.
Still pretty bad?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
We're always working on it.
Yeah. No, I would say I agree. Like, I think, especially from at least what I know, coaching in an industry we're in, like, there is, I'd say it happens with both, male, female, but, well, it happens with everyone, I should say, but, yeah, men tend to not talk about it as much, or it's played off as a joke, or like, someone will pay another guy out for being skinny and he'll just kind of laugh it off, but it's really, like, upsetting him. And it happens a lot even in the gym. That's like a lot of people start training, right? They don't want to be skinny and they get paid out for being skinny all the time. No, so I think it's common with both. I do think it's getting better with men talking about it. I think putting the term body dysmorphia, a lot of guys are more comfortable calling it that than body other things. Issues. Yeah, than body image issues. And you see a lot of guys talk about body dysmorphia now. So I do think it's opening up. But yeah, no, I agree. Like, it doesn't make it any worse or better for anyone though. Like,
it's oftentimes a shared experience. Just there will be obviously slight differences in terms of where our ideals are. Women mostly want to adopt a body that is thinner or smaller or more petite, whereas men typically gravitate towards the muscularity side of things. But that also isn't necessarily true. I've known people who have had body dysmorphic issues around men particularly wanting to be thinner in order to cycle better, for example. Yeah. Or in my case, women who want to feel more muscular, and that's deviating away from the expectations of women to be thin. So there are slight differences in terms of, like, stereotypically or there are generalized differences, but generally speaking, we do share similar experiences with body image versus body dysmorphia.
Yeah. And, like, similar stresses and stuff, right? And I think that's, it's, so many, like, just quickly, like, it's so common for people now to take PEDs, even when they're not competing in a sport, and that, and it's just to look better on the beach. And I see that reflecting a lot in lifting and stuff, and in the gym, just in that regard, with both, with everyone. It's not just a male thing now.
I personally do find it a little bit frustrating, because I do think, PEDs are performance enhancing drugs. They're there for a purpose. They serve a purpose for a lot of sport, especially in untested sporting avenues, which makes complete sense. I don't particularly, to be frank, I don't particularly respect a lot of the individuals who choose to use PEDs for the purpose of looking good on a beach. But at the same time, I also can understand where it comes from and the pressure to fit this idealized mold. And it's really upsetting that that's the lengths that a lot of people will go to.
Because it's risky. And
exactly.
Chances are, you can try to do everything right, but there's no such thing as a healthy PED user. There's no such thing as a healthy smoker. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
exactly, yeah. You're always going to be putting yourself at risk.
Yes, like, and there's going to be long-lasting implications just because you want it to look better again, objectively at the beach. Well, it's crazy to me. I don't understand it, but also I don't understand it on a personal level. But I also can see why people do it, right? With that feeling like they need to look a certain way. Yeah. Well, that's all the questions answered. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I don't think we covered a lot.
Yeah, we did a lot. This is a long one. Like, it's good. You've done really well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at Corinne Wooden on Instagram, or just search The Fray Quad Mother. That'll come up too. You can also find my business page, Move For You PT, on Instagram as well. Pretty easily accessible. So if you have any other questions for me regarding this topic, I'm always open through my DMs to have a chat.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. And thank you for being the second video, like the second podcast. Outstanding.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. This was awesome. Cheers for that. I think I'm going to have Dylan Hellriegel next time, but I don't know. I've actually got a few people lined up to come on, so it's really exciting. I also don't know how often I'll do these. Let's say once every fortnight to take the pressure off myself. Thanks heaps for coming on, Corinne.
Thank you.
I will talk to you in about 10 seconds.